a lot easier to stay in the dysfunction of, oh, you're a Democrat, I can't get down with you. You're a Republican, I can't get down with you. You're from the rural area, I can't get down with you. You're from the city, I can't get down with you. Rather than saying, I'm here to be historic and do something that's going to make history, to make lives better. And I might have to do this alone. And the work that you do, the work that I do, the work that needs to be done, we're going to have to be doing a lot of stuff alone. We're just got to be in our space of being courageous and brave and visionary, and just know that we might be lonely too. Good morning to you, sir. It's always good to spend time with you.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm so excited to record with you today and see what ideas we bounce around.
Well, the beauty of doing this with you, as you well know, is we always are bouncing around ideas, and it's more than just ideas. We're putting things into place that become actions to try to help people. And, you know, I want to actually get to that first, because the whole purpose of this is not to just, you know, try to sound smart or have a podcast. It's to give people ideas to say, these are things that we can do to make our communities better, make our country better. And, you know, this gets to my first question. Anybody that's read An Unspeakable Hope, which, by the way, if you read the book, you know that this is a guy to really admire, look up to, see the things he's really doing well in the world. And you know I love you.
Yes, sir.
And if you've read the book, you know that he's somebody that is lovable and somebody you want to embrace.
Are you just saying that because I wrote about you in the book?
No, that's part of it. But, you know, it's just kind of like the sandwich analogy. You say something nice, you give them some junk, and then you give them something nice at the end. So that's kind of how I'm framing the question. You're known as being somebody that does a lot of community involvement, does a lot of police interaction with the community, and that's your genesis story. But here you are wanting to branch out and do more things and talk about education and jobs and safety and healthcare and dietary concerns and all this other stuff. Leon, I love you, and we've had these conversations forever, and I'd love to do this on this podcast, but can you explain to folks why you're not out of your lane by branching out to these things, why these things are connected to the very work that you started out with the HERE Foundation and the stuff you talk about in your book in regards to helping communities be safer when it comes to police interactions?
Absolutely. You know what's funny? I remember years ago I had a conversation with you, and we were talking about Black Lives Matter. And you said, well, if Black Lives Matter only matter when it comes to police brutality and not education and not health care, like, what are we doing? And so, you know, that was a seed that was planted, 10 years ago?
Yeah, it's been a while. We've known each other for what, since 2013, 2014, somewhere in there.
Yeah, and so, you know, that seed was planted, and I began to reflect on that and evolve as a leader. And so 10 years later, that's just my theory of change. You know, I'm committed to serving community, and I don't just focus on police and community interactions. I mean, my story, being shot by a Pittsburgh police officer, led me to go speak in schools. But then when I was speaking in schools, I saw the injustice within, you know, the schools, right? I saw, you know, the injustice with health outcomes and different things. And for me, as someone who is compassionate about people, I would read, I would educate myself and try to figure out how can I leverage my influence and my intelligence to bring people together to solve for these issues.
I mean, and here's the thing, right? People don't usually see all that stuff being tied together, and you can bring one to another. The beauty of who you've become is the fact that you're really, really good at tying all these folks together. And then we'll get into it in other episodes. But, like, for example, you and I had a conversation recently about your emerging relationship with the Amish community here in Pennsylvania, right? Talking about, having your own businesses, growing your own food, being healthy, being true to who you are, and still being able to be prosperous. And they've never seen, a real live, as they called it, colored person. And they're getting down and vibing with you, and you're just as comfortable with them as you are in the streets, just as much as you are at the country clubs, just as much as you are in an international flight. And the thing that I think that this will be able to bring to people is the fact that, you're an atypical leader. You talked about you growing as a leader. Leaders don't usually come from the background you come from, or they're not viewed or respected or revered that way. And we're in 2025, man. We got to be breaking down these stereotypes to go after those things that we've been talking about.
Oh, I'm a stereotype destroyer.
Oh, absolutely.
It was so interesting. I took my cousin to Berlin, Ohio, where I was in this leadership cohort with the Amish community there. There were some Amish folks, some Mennonites, and they were really good people, And my cousin, he was like, yo, are these people racist? Do they like us? Are you nervous? And I was like, bro, you'll see, And we got there, and he fell in love with these folks. And that was on a Friday.
Okay.
That Saturday morning, the following day, I was taking him to Muhammad's Mosque 22.
Here in Pittsburgh, yeah.
To here in Pittsburgh.
Nation of Islam.
The Nation of
where
Islam.
I have been
right.
as a cradle Catholic. Again, it's one of you talk about a stereotype destroyer. I kind of think I got my battle axe as well with you there. But go ahead.
Yeah, and Bernie was helping the nation, do some work remodeling the mosque, and that's just an example of my love for humanity. People judge people, they say things about people. But when you're confident and courageous enough and also curious enough to go into these spaces to understand how people operate and why they operate the way they do, you'll find how interconnected we are as a community and as a society. And here in 2025 with so much division, I think is really important for us to, put our egos to the side, put our judgments to the side, and lean in to understand people who we may have othered in the past.
You talk about putting your ego at the door. You getting into your Quincy Jones and We Are the World. See, you too young for that. You don't know nothing about that. Go ask your folks about We Are the World, Quincy Jones, Michael Jackson, all that other jazz. That said, you can tell I'm a Gen X guy. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm claiming my generation.
Right.
You said something that I think is that we need to dive into, because if people are going to get down with us over the course of our podcast, they got to understand that word curious, that curiosity, that intellectual curiosity, that societal curiosity that you and I in our lives, have been able to exemplify, to be able to go into different type of segments of the society and do it easily and still find the common humanity. Talk about your evolution with that. I know that we're vibing, and people that are sitting there saying, Dad, you're interviewing him, Lenny. I'm like, trust me, this is just how we roll.
Right,
trust me, he's going to ask me a hard question soon. But with that said, let's talk about that a little bit, because I know I had to grow into that. But, my background, scholarship kid to prep schools and Davidson College kind of lends to that a little bit. Your evolution was thrown at you hard through a lot of trauma, and you could have chosen something different. Instead, you chose to be curious. How are you teaching other people to be curious based on what you learned yourself?
Yeah, leading by example, right? Anytime I speak, we do an affirmation. And in the affirmation, we say, I cannot teach what I do not know.
Yeah.
I cannot lead where I will not go. Right? And so, again, leading by example. So an example of that is, how can I talk about healing and reconciliation when I'm MFing the police online? Right? It's a contradiction, right? And so if I'm going to be about healing and reconciliation within my community, and I want to get someone like, or want to help someone like Brother Jason forgive a childhood friend who...
Jason Rivers.
Yeah.
Let's talk about his story for just a second, because, we're bringing people into the circle. Yes. So we're talking about a brother that we both know, we both love, a guy by the name of Jason Rivers,
yes,
who is a local activist here in Pittsburgh, but has done stuff in Detroit and other places around the country as well. But his origin story, much like yours, unfortunately, and again, I got gun violence in my background as well. He wasn't shot. but his brother was.
Yes.
And unlike you being with us today, his brother is not. So fill us in.
Yeah, and two childhood friends were involved in his murder, right? And one of them is serving time in prison. And so, at a point, I revealed to Jason that, my friend was incarcerated for murdering his brother. And Jason was, on a healing journey. And I ended up connecting Jason with my friend who is incarcerated and took Jason to the prison, actually, to meet him, several times. And now they're working on some restorative justice practices together. But I bring that up because how can I expect, someone like Jason to forgive if I'm not willing to forgive? And there was a moment, where Jason called me out, and, we had went to visit my friend who's incarcerated. And maybe a few months later, Pittsburgh police wanted to have a basketball team in Jason's basketball league.
He has a basketball league to bring people together.
Yeah, and I was like, heck, though. It's not happening, And Jason was like, bro, you talked to me about healing and forgiveness. This is your chance, And he just spun it back on me, man, and held me accountable to be about what I was talking about, And we need people like that in our lives.
But that's something that's a bigger overall theme that's going to be part of our conversations. And it's not just the conversations we're having here. I mean, people will get a chance to see this, but the beauty of our relationship and what we're doing in the community and what we're doing in society is the fact that for every conversation like this, there are 10, 20, 30 more. Let's talk about something else because we're setting some ground rules, right? So number one, we already talked about curiosity, right? Let's talk about accountability, and let's take it with a caveat, loving accountability, because you can hold somebody accountable and you can be very legalistic. They say those that believe in the Christian tradition believe that Satan is probably the best, legal analyst that you could ever have because Satan knows the law. People go to the New Testament. When he was tempting Christ, he was tempting Christ through Scripture. So he knows the laws, but the whole purpose, and again, as a cradle Catholic, Christ came to supersede and transcend the law, allow there to be healing and forgiveness past the law. So there's accountability, but there's also the love with the accountability to help people get to where they need to get to. And that's something that, in these times where everybody, to your point, you're talking about calling people out. Everybody calls everybody out on social media or, I'm going to tell them, I'll put them in their place. I'm going to keep it 100, right? But it's like, okay, are you doing it with love? Because if you're not doing it with love, they're not hearing what you got to say anyway. They heard you, but they're not listening to you. If they're not listening to you, they're not changing their behavior to get better.
Yeah. Well, in regards to, forgiveness and accountability, I think that a lot of people, when they look at forgiveness, they view it from a Christ-like perspective. And
what do you mean by that? Christ-like perspective?
Like you're righteous. You're on this path of righteousness. And some people think, man, when they see Christ, man, Christ forgave. He died for our sins. We can't be like Christ, right?
That's perfect.
It's perfect.
And I can't be perfect. But that's not what accountability is, nor is that curiosity.
Exactly.
Curiosity is almost an admission that I'm not perfect. I need to stay curious in order to become better. I'm holding myself accountable because I know I'm going to make mistakes, or the people that I'm involved with are going to make mistakes, and how do we get better? So I like how you're saying that because that breaks down the whole perfection myth.
Yeah, and they don't think they can get better if they can't be like Christ. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for us to understand that even forgiveness is imperfect. And that's why accountability is so important, right? And, even accountability for ourselves. And my grandfather, he calls it supreme accountability.
Okay.
Right? And supreme accountability means you are supremely responsible for your life. And my granddad told me, yes, your dad went to prison. Yes, your sister died. Yes, you got shot by a police officer. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to let this be an excuse to remain dysfunctional and perpetuate dysfunction and brokenness within our family, within your community, within society? Or are you going to connect this to purpose and make a difference? Right. And that was the catalyst of change really for me.
And he's not even telling you. I mean, here's what I get down with, because here's the real. It's so funny. I've told you this before, and I ain't trying to embarrass you to America, but it's always that dynamic of, we're peers, but you look at me as a mentor, but you're as old as my oldest child.
Yeah.
And so there's this weird dynamic that always goes on with us. Now, let me take that to your grandfather and what he said to you and why this matters. And this is an example for all different types of folks. He didn't give you that message as a 45-year-old man that, had $500,000 in a 401k. He's telling you this in your 20s after a lot of trauma in your young life. And it could have been very easy to be like, nah, man, I ain't getting down with that. You don't get me. And to be able to accept that message and then internalize it and allow it to be a mustard seed inside of you and grow, I mean, that takes curiosity, and it also takes an awful lot of loving accountability.
Yeah, 100%. And, one of the things that I try to do is have those honest conversations with young people. And so when I'm in the schools, I was at Westinghouse yesterday, and I was talking
Westinghouse High School, which is in the Homewood Brushton area of Pittsburgh, which is usually one of the more troubled areas. My mom grew up there. My dad grew up right next door there. And both of my parents went to Westinghouse. So I'm just trying to contextualize. Go ahead.
Yep. And, I was talking to the students about police. They knew I was shot by a police officer. They're reading my book, and they could not understand how I work with police in regards to the HERE Foundation. And, we have programs where we partner with police and facilitate healthy relationships between police and community. They could not understand, right? And so as I'm sharing with them, I began asking them questions. So the first question was, do your parents like police? Raise your hand if they do. No one raised their hand. Second question, do your grandparents like police? Raise your hand if they do. No one raised their hand. I said, well, tell me, what have they done besides complain? All these kids are like, oh, we ain't thinking about it like that, Then I began to go to talk about my story in the traffic stop, right? And I said, if you were the officer who shot me the night I was stopped by those police officers, do you think I would be in this wheelchair right now? They're like, heck no, I said, that's why I think you should think about a career in law enforcement, right? And I said, have you ever been harassed by a police officer? They said, yes. Would you, if you were a police officer, would you harass someone who looks like you? They said no. And again, that's how I encourage them to think about careers in law enforcement. And then on the flip side, the accountability piece, I talk to them about the violence and different things in the community, right? Because I'm encouraging them from a loving accountability perspective to think about what role are they playing in regards to public safety. And so I have a relationship-based approach in regards to public safety and police. I know you've been in policy for a long time, so I'm interested in your perspective in regards to loving accountability, curiosity, and public safety from a policy perspective.
And we can get into that, and we're going to talk about that in episode number 2. But I got one other thing I want to bring up to you because it's something you touched upon that people just gloss over, whether it's in your story. And I know this podcast ain't just about you, but you're here, so it is about you. But it's something that we also have to encourage our young people to have. And I think people overlook it when it comes to young people and even people my generation stepping up into leadership, doing the things they need to do. 1, curiosity. We talked about that, the right type of curiosity. 2, accountability. And I put the caveat on it, loving accountability. But number 3, and it doesn't get talked about enough, courage, being brave. Because I'm sitting there listening to you talk about these kids at Westinghouse, and I know some kids had to have come to you and be like, man, you a punk. They shot you, and you just punked down because you scared or you got paid or whatever. And it's like, do you understand that it takes a lot less courage to just be mad, to just be angry, to just be bitter, to take my money and use it to be angry or be isolated. It takes a lot more courage to do the right thing, to step out. It takes a lot more courage to ask a question. I don't understand this lesson in school. It takes a lot more courage to go on a diet and say, I'm going to lose 50 pounds because my grandmother died of diabetes. My daddy, has high blood pressure, and he's unable to be functional at 49 years old. I'm going to have the courage to change that pattern in my lifestyle. Before we go with this episode, because we're setting ground rules, right?
Yep.
Curiosity. We need to remain curious as we're solving these problems with people, not for people, with people. 2, we're going to do it with a loving accountability because we love humanity. You mentioned it. You said it several times.
Absolutely.
That's what I've known about you ever since I saw that $1 million Magic Johnson smile the first time years ago. But number 3, talk to me a little bit about bravery and courage as we're trying to help create a better world.
Listen, having courage and being brave means doing, staying on the righteous path and doing things out of the ordinary, right? In certain spaces, the normal thing, the traditional things to do may not always be the righteous thing to do.
Yeah.
Right? And it takes a lot of courage and strength to look at things and say, dysfunction it shouldn't be normal. And in a lot of spaces, we've normalized dysfunction. I mean, when we think about politics right now, right?
Do we have to?
Really, I think, when we think about family structures, right, we normalize dysfunction because we love people. When we think about, public safety, we normalize dysfunction because certain people, maybe they're in public safety, they may not want to question the system.
Yep.
Right.
And even in politics, like you said,
Even
look, it's a lot easier to stay in the dysfunction of, oh, you're a Democrat, I can't get down with you. You're a Republican, I can't get down with you. You're from the rural area, I can't get down with you. You're from the city, I can't get down with you. Rather than saying, I'm here to be historic and do something that's going to make history, to make lives better. And I might have to do this alone. And the work that you do, the work that I do, the work that needs to be done, we're going to have to be doing a lot of stuff alone. We're just got to be in our space of being courageous and brave and visionary, and just know that we might be lonely too.
Yeah, and I don't even think the loneliness is long term.
Very true.
Right?
Very
because
true.
When you're courageous and brave, you empower and embolden other people.
And it's contagious.
It's contagious, and so then you get people within law enforcement speaking up. Then you get people within politics who are speaking up. And one of the things that I really would like to do within these different systems, whether it's family, whether it's public safety or politics, I want to encourage our young people, right, to keep their righteousness, stay pure, right, stay loving, and stay curious, because there are so many amazing people who say, I'm really passionate about public safety, but I would never be a police officer. I'm really passionate about politics and policy,
but I'd never be a politician.
But I'll never be a politician
because they're crooked. It's like, well, how do you? It's just like the police officer example. How do you expect to fix this if somebody like you is not inclined to get involved? How do you expect to change the dynamics of businesses where people are hiring different types of folks and giving them a chance to have careers if you're not inclined to be an entrepreneur, or you won't do well in school, or you won't go into this career, or, as in the case with you, and I'm going to put a bow on the conversation right now, if you're not willing to say, this bad thing happened to me, these bad things happened to my family, these bad things have happened to my community, but I'm going to get involved to not just complain. Remember how you told those kids,
Yep.
did your folks just complain or they do something? What am I going to do that's not just complaining? How am I going to be curious and dig into the root causes of these issues? How am I going to have 360 degrees of accountability, including and starting with myself, to make sure things are better and there's progress, where I'm not just sitting there talking about this a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, and that how am I going to do it in a way that's courageous, where I can go into rooms that I'm not familiar with. I can go talk to the Amish community, the Mennonite community in Eastern Ohio, Central Pennsylvania, and get solutions, bring non-traditional allies together to get something done. I think those are part of the ground rules, I'd have to say. There might be more, but they're ground rules. They're not like rigid. These are things for people to lean on, right? Let's be curious. Let's be accountable. Let's be courageous, and let's make a difference. So I think that, Mr. Leon Ford, if we could start with that, if we can help people do that as we talk about specific things, they keep at least those three things close to vest, I think we can get some things done, man.
Well, let's do it. I'm excited, and I'm hoping that those folks out there, who are listening, could pick up what we're putting down.
I think they can, man. Well, listen, this is the first episode of a conversation with Leon and Lenny. We're looking forward to you coming back again in the next episode, where we're going to dive into a few more specific things about what we're looking to do and just bounce ideas off of you so that we can spark the type of empowerment that can change our communities for the better. Meanwhile, we'll talk to you soon. TCNGB, take care and God bless.
Peace.